Hi, my name is Nikki Tibbetts, and you are viewing my final presentation for EDU 6324, and this is my assessment critique. As a high school educator, I see firsthand how assessments, especially standardized tests, affect student learning and even teachers' teaching. Students feel the pressure of performing at or above the suggested level, and teachers feel the pressure of getting their students to the level the state feels he or she should be at. It is my assumption that these feelings carry with students and educators at the next level. When Ned Murray mentioned some aspects of education today, I felt his thoughts couldn't be more accurate. He mentioned how educators need to prepare young people for future jobs that don't yet exist, for individuals that could hold at least 4 to 7 jobs in his or her lifetime. As an educator, that is a very challenging thing to prepare for. It's also a target that teachers want to reach within their students, but sometimes the standardized multiple choice test takes more of the classroom time than does preparing for a future career. According to Murray, what matters is preparing young students for the world today. Here in North Carolina, I teach high school English. In the last 5 years, I've witnessed how assessments at this level affect students both positively and negatively. My first year teaching, students were assessed in English 1 their freshman year. Now students are assessed all 4 years in each of their core English classes, the main test now being in English 2 their 10th grade year. These test results show student growth, teacher growth, and compare students from school to school, county to county, and across the state. This past year, these assessments even provided schools with a letter grade. Ours was a C. The North Carolina end-of-course test. The North Carolina end-of-course tests are used to sample a student's knowledge of subject-related concepts as specified in the North Carolina Standard Course of Study and to provide a global estimate of the student's mastery of the material in a particular content area. The North Carolina end-of-course tests were initiated in response to legislation passed by the North Carolina General Assembly, the North Carolina Elementary and Secondary Reform Act of 1984. The NCDPI, which is the North Carolina Department of Public Instruction Accountability Division, states that its mission is to promote the academic achievement of all North Carolina public school students and to assist stakeholders in understanding and gauging this achievement against state and national standards. The major thrust of this mission is threefold: the design and development of reliable and valid assessment instruments, the uniform implementation of and access to suitable assessment instruments for all students, and the provision of accurate and statistically appropriate reports. And the mission of the actual test. The mission of the test development section is to oversee the design, development, and implementation of a high-quality, technically sound student assessment system that assists stakeholders in making informed educational decisions. The program stakeholders are elementary teachers starting in grade 3. They start with end of grade tests in grade 3, middle school teachers in math and language arts, and high school teachers for English 2 grade 10. The primary purpose of the assessment is clearly stated and supported in most regards, but the question of accountability is at stake. 7th grade social studies teacher Kelly Cloak states, student accountability is something I question. These assessments are used for the teacher evaluation instrument. In theory, these assessments are used to determine growth and achievement. As an educator, I find the assessments to be important and necessary, but I do agree with Ms. Cloak's statement, and I will come back to accountability later on in my critique. According to the Accountability Services website, the purpose of the end-of-course tests, which is my area of expertise for English 2, is to sample students' knowledge, provide a global estimate of students' mastery of the material in a particular content area, and also to assess teacher effectiveness in regards to Standard 6. Standard 6 states that teachers contribute to the academic success of their students, which means the work of the teacher results in acceptable, measurable progress for students based on established performance expectations using appropriate data to demonstrate growth. So it's now a new program goal that teachers are assessed on how well their students perform on these tests. Student learning outcomes and assessment measurements. Student learning outcomes are based on an achievement level and if students are college and career ready. According to the grid located below, which I will show you here in just a minute, students' learning outcomes are measurable and easy to understand. Preparing students to meet an achievement level 4 or a 5 would help to improve the program, but students are prepared differently across the board. Different schools and different counties prepare students differently, which results in students receiving different scores overall. The assessment measurements can be viewed here, where students It denotes that a student is college and career ready if they meet a level 5, which is superior command of knowledge and skills, or a level 4, which denotes solid command of knowledge and skills. A level 3 used to be what was considered passing. It is still a proficient standard. A level 2 and a level 1 is not proficient or college and career ready. And then just to show you, a level 4, students performing at a level 4 have a solid command of the knowledge and skills contained in the Common Core State Standards. Reading standards for literature is assessed by referring to the text when asking and answering questions, recounting stories, and determining a central message, explaining how the message is conveyed through key details in the text, describing character and explaining how their actions contribute to the plot, etc. And then achievement level 5 would be all of that plus some, more on the superior level. Benchmarks and standards. In North Carolina, middle school students are given benchmark assessments in math and language arts called Case 21 tests. According to their website, which is located there, these assessments are aligned to the Common Core State Standards and assess student learning. These assessments are beneficial to teachers for the following reasons. Teachers can give the benchmark assessments and assess student scores within 48 hours. Teachers can identify individual student and classroom needs and reinforce or reteach skills to prepare students for each state's current standard or Common Core State assessments. The benchmark assessment used for middle school students greatly reflects that of student learning outcomes. These higher order thinking questions align with the Common Core standards, allowing teachers to measure student growth and achievement. It's also a time for teachers to look at areas where students need to grow. An area where this is lacking is at the high school level. My English 2 students do not take a benchmark assessment like the one stated here. There is no formal or required way to measure student growth other than aligned to the Common Core standards. So we as teachers can align what the students have done with the standards, but there's no formal assessment. Some areas of growth or achievement can be missed by doing it the way that we are required to at the high school level. Having a formal benchmark assessment with concrete results is a must in order to help high school students improve and be college and career ready, which you just saw what college and career ready looks like. The timeline: middle school English language arts and math courses are able to collect data within 48 hours, as just mentioned from the Case 21. Middle school ELA and math end of grade assessment results are received and sent to students within 2 weeks. High school English 2 end of course assessments are received within 2 weeks. These results are posted to EVOS, which is the data system, and reviewed the following school year. This data is placed on EVOS to compare student growth from year to year. At this point, stakeholders are supposed to do whatever is necessary to help low achieving students improve and keep higher achieving students at the top. The timeline for the tests used to be much quicker when students had to retest. It used to be in North Carolina that students would have to score an achievement level of at least a 3, or the students would have to test again. So if a student scored a 1 or a 2, which would mean they're not proficient, they would test again. If the student did not receive a score of a 3 after the second testing, he or she would have to retake the class again. So if they did not pass the language arts end of grade test, they would have to take that test again, or the English 2 test or the math test, etc. They would have to take that class again in order to be proficient in that grade level. When students had to retest, the timeline for receiving the data was significantly quicker than it is now, where students do not have to retest. Assessment critique: for program goals, I gave the program or the assessment accomplished. There are some educators that do not agree with the rating of Standard 6, which measures teacher growth, but the research and information provided on the North Carolina Department of Public Instruction website supports the information in a clear, realistic fashion. Also, the focus of study, English 2, math, language arts, etc., is clearly labeled depending on the assessment the student is taking. Student learning outcomes, I said, were developing. I stated this as developing because it has changed many times in my 5 years of working with this assessment. Although students receive an achievement level, the levels are continuously changing, and the measurement of student growth is also changing. Once these outcomes remain the same for a number of years, I think they will progress in their stages and eventually make it to accomplishing and even advance from there. But until it remains the same for a few years, I kept it at developing. The benchmarks and standards, I also kept at developing. There is no specific rubric for these benchmarks or standards. And then because the student learning outcomes are still developing, I think that it hinders the capabilities of the benchmarks as well. The benchmark assessments at the middle school level appear to be helpful according to some stakeholders, but are not given at the high school level. The timeline is also developing. At the start of each school year and sometimes mid-year, our faculty and staff will get together to view student data. Our procedures and what to look for are established. What to analyze, record, and collect is not clearly stated as what would need to be accomplished. So once it's determined exactly what teachers are analyzing, recording, collecting, looking for, it will remain at developing. Data analysis is at accomplishing. The key findings identified are that of the student achievement, which I showed you before with achievement level 4 or 5. I do think that those are very clearly stated for what the student scored, and then explains exactly what that score means. So I do think that that is at the level of accomplishing. Results and action items, I said we're accomplishing. The student results and ways to improve and help students grow are discussed at the beginning of each year faculty meeting, and sometimes also mid-year depending on when results come in. We work in departments to help students grow in our subject area. So the English teachers will work together to look at student data, math will work together, etc. My recommendation, although I find that assessing students is important for a number of reasons, I find that the North Carolina end of course assessments are lacking in a few areas. The first area is consistency. The test has changed, the results have changed, and the achievement levels have changed a number of times in my 5 years of working in the school system. In order for faculty and students to understand the test and its results, it needs to remain the same, or the changes need to be explained in detail. Second, accountability is important. In 2010, when I gave my first end of course test, students had to pass the test to pass the course. Students were held accountable for their learning. Now the test does not determine a student's promotion, which doesn't provide as much weight for the students. Although I don't think the pressure that students are faced with standardized tests is important, I do think that holding students accountable for their grades and for their results on these tests is something that should be stressed. Third, the use and collection of data is important and needs to be used more frequently. My recommendation is to find a way in which this data can be used and shared with faculty and students, parents, and other stakeholders in order to help students grow across the board and improve the test in general. Lastly, I think the way students are prepared for the test should be similar in order to receive the same results. As a reflection, looking into the testing that I do twice each and every year was very eye-opening. I found it a relief to know that so much goes into these tests when I see only a small portion. As someone who administers a few tests each semester, I know our testing coordinator does a lot of work to make testing successful, but it wasn't until this research that I saw the details of each achievement level. Looking at the achievement levels and comparing it to my students' scores this spring semester, I can see my students who are college and career ready based on the achievement level, those who have some room to grow, and those that maybe could have performed much higher than they did that day. And here are my resources. Thank you.